Good evening and welcome to our webinar tonight. We're speaking to you from UBED College in the Student Services Department. At UBED College, we pride ourselves on having national recognition for a number of initiatives. So tonight we are welcoming our guest speaker, Melanie Robson, who is working with us on another one of our initiatives, which is the Transgender Awareness Initiative. So good evening and welcome, Melanie.
Good evening. Thank you for bringing me tonight.
Thank you for joining. So the format that we are going to take tonight is that we are going to give Melanie a chance to speak to us about her experiences, life experiences, and we'll also chat to you about some of our supporting services. We will then move over to a question and answer section. And in the question and answer section, we will ask that, only appropriate questions are asked. Let's just respect each other. And thank you, Melanie, once again. So we've been chatting for a few months now, Melanie, and I know a little bit about you and your journey, but I suppose, it's been a very long journey for you. So would you like to share a little bit of that journey with us tonight?
It's like everything else in some ways. It's how do you know when you were different from other people? Obviously a mixture of background and situation and time is also important. I mean, for instance, when I was a teenager, it was still illegal for homosexual to be homosexual. So being different in any way, like in terms of sexuality, was obviously quite difficult. When realised you were different, as I say, starts in many, many ways. For me, it was different because my family background was different to a lot of people that I was at school. So that was different. My whole way of seeing things was different. It's like everything else. When do you know your choices in life, when they're going to be? When do you make them? And do you make them? Are they thrust upon you? Are they choices that, if you done your life a different way, you would never make them? Nobody can tell. You just know that at some stage in our life we make these choices. As I say, putting that into context, it's also the time that it took place. When I left home in 1967, homosexuality just moved up to 18% of the adults of the age of 21. So life was very, very different. Someone in my background, to make the choices was not as easy in terms of what we wanted to do, rather than sometimes what we had to do. When did I know I was different? I'm very, very not about it. Hardly anyway. Families weren't open to those sort of discussions. General public weren't open to those discussions. It was very much kept inside and in its own lives. And whether that did any long-term damage is hard to say. One knows that it does. It does cause problems. It does cause unhappiness. And anybody who's going through such a process will know that unhappiness, which is difficult, which can only be helped by people around you helping you, giving you support. And in those days, I don't think there really was much. Short of going into drama or theatre or something like that, your choices were limited. From a working class background, I was never going to have lots and lots of money, so I had to make choices that would give me a life, would give me a career, would give me work. And in many ways, you did those things, even though it may not have been your first choice. It was a choice to make. But when it came to understanding what you are, that comes in sorts of many different ways. Considering that perhaps you're homosexual at some stage in your life, but thinking, well, this isn't going to work, or like this isn't going to work in life. So you make those decisions, but then you try and do things that make you like a place in society, that you become part of society, that you become a useful member of society. And in those days, politics was very much in the forefront of making changes to society. And I suppose, as I said, that's what we are doing, making changes to society, by standing up and coming out and saying what you want. But in those days, it wasn't possible. So But when do you know you're heterosexual? Who knows that? When do you know that you're homosexual? When do you know you're trans? When do you know you don't? It just becomes part and parcel of your life. And sometimes it's good experiences, sometimes it's bad experiences. And of course, depends on society as to where those things become. If we consider that it's not until the 80s that we see a growing development of people there who want to show their sexuality to the world. You're talking about, like, for me, 20 years before that sort of was readily available. So by then I was involved in family life, I was involved in work, I was involved with things that you do as an adult. So you didn't really have time to go back and think, oh, it never leaves you. That feeling never leaves you. It's quite clear that when situations came about where I could develop what I wanted to do, that I did so. But it's not without consequences.
So what was it that finally, gave you the confidence to make those steps to be truly who you are?
I think in many ways, knowing that you've taken the responsibility and carried it out, and for now, like this for you, that you've worked all those years, that now you want to make changes in your life which you want to make, rather than how society sees you. So it's a question of many things. I think for me, being able to retire and not having to have that, being a teacher, to go into teaching at a show with trans in those days, you wouldn't have a job. You just wouldn't. I mean, even now we have people who have difficulty in coming out in the workplace. And I have a close friend who is in a workplace where they want to come out and they find it very, very difficult. And they're a trade union official. They still find it very, very difficult because they have to say things to people, do things, all sorts of series of things take place. So it's very, very difficult. I suppose in a sense, being I'm privileged in the sense of being retired, I can make those decisions. But then you are restricted, of course, because you've got family, you've got all those things, you've got parts of your life, and how that affects them. And them seeing you a certain way for most of your life. And then suddenly, part of your life is starting to change. You want to say, well, look, this is what I want to be. And they find it very difficult, very painful.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, what services are available now that you feel you could have really, really done with when you had your struggles?
Bypass. That have been available in gyros that goes with bypass. That have been available in changes, I don't know. Perhaps something really different. But then when you live in a small town, your options are limited as well. So living in a city like this, we have a lot of options for making the change and being supported. You have a parent support, you have parents of transgender people support group. You have people like Liam Mason, who's in bypass, and gyros. You've got people, the mermaids. There are a lot of things going on. You've also got the health service. I mean, to me, the health service, the problem with the health service is they still see transgender, they still see sexuality in terms of psychology. Because there's something that, you have to be, you are diagnosed as gender dysphoric, as if there's something mental, you've got to have a mental health problem, which isn't the answer, of course. But that's where we're up to. But we're still moving along. When I was young, and your friends wouldn't. Your friends knew you were different. The people who went to school with knew you were different, and that causes for that. I personally didn't want to stay with my peer group. When at the age of 18, they didn't want to leave the area completely, and so I ended up in the Northwest. From there, into teachers training and into teaching. So.
But you're also extremely active in your community. So what's out there for people now that you can say, sometimes we feel like we need an outlet, or sometimes we feel like we want to be social with like-minded people and all that sort of thing.
I mean, being retired, there's lots and lots out there. I mean, anybody who's retired says they've got nothing to do, I really can't understand it. There are so many choirs, and everywhere I go and everything I do, I am Melanie, and I want to be accepted as Melanie, not as some sort of and you know, most of the time, you don't get anybody whatsoever. People willingly accept you and welcome you. But within the transgender community, you've got sort of things like interest. You've got things like Say Your Health for the Trans Health Programme, and they tend to be the older people. You know, because there's people my age, you know, who have come out within the last 10, 15 years and had the surgery within the last 10, 15 years. So you can see it's not just me saying, oh, well, you're just making excuses for yourself. It actually is difficult for everybody. As I say, most of us at our age, usually most of us have some family at some stage in the process, because you don't fully identify as gay, so to speak. But at the same time, you know you're different. So that when the time allows, you try and make those changes. And there's plenty of people who are even older than me who have made those changes. And find it difficult.
Some of the services that we are currently working with, I mean, you mentioned YPAS, we've just had some training, which was, YPAS led. We've got Sigma, which is the hate crime unit. Our college is a third-party reporting centre for hate crime. So we work closely with Merseyside Police because there's a lot of transphobia or, other kinds of phobias.
And just to come in there, say our House Trans Health Project, we actually do discuss hate crime.
Yeah.
On a regular sort of basis. And I've done hate crime training, and at one point I was a racial relations coordinator. So I was involved in that sort of work anyway. And you can see it's difficult. It's hard. And we're going back to the 80s and Liverpool was very, very I know the youngsters that I used to teach, I would use their proper name. They didn't want to know. They wanted to be known by the common name that everybody else knew them as, because otherwise they're going to be picked out and picked on. And I remember once Chinese New Year's just been, and I was involved with Dragon Dance as myself. But I did it in 88 with people, and I always remember that they from the pagoda asked a mixed Chinese child in my school, and he ran a mile because he didn't want to be identified as Chinese. He just and that was the 80s. So and this stuff is still, and as you say, you're a third party reporting for hate crime, and I've been involved in all that sort of stuff, and you tend to be, So yeah.
So we speak specifically from a student point of view because we're in student services, but the information is quite valuable because what you're saying is that for older people, so they should be the staff and the members of our community who use our college facilities. There's so much out there. I just want to pick up on some of the other agencies that we work on. We have Armstead, who we've been working with for about 7 years now, so very recognized. And then we have the Sex and Sexual Health Services. We have RAPA, of course, and then within college we've got the pastoral support team, our chaplaincy, our counselling, our health and well-being. So it's just good for our young people to know that there's support services within and outside of college, because we have half terms and summers, and we can't really support them during those times.
And one thing I told you about was there's an actual support group for the parents of transgender pupils, students, and who actually they do their own thing, if you like. They started up under Trust, Merseyside Trust, but they decided they wanted to be totally independent, so that they wouldn't have anybody telling them what to do, if you like. They were making all their own decisions, and that seems to have been quite successful. So there's quite a lot out there.
And I know that we've referred some of our students to New Beginnings as well, and it's been quite successful. So basically, I mean, we've touched on a little bit of advice, for parents. But what would you say would be crucial for parents or carers of, transitioning young people to take
They,
account of.
they have made a mistake. It isn't something they've done. It's just that's the way it is. And supporting the children is very important. And as a parent, I know that myself. You support children under no matter what. Even if they do start to say, we don't like to see you like this. You're not going to get to see the grandchildren like this. But you still have to be there to support them, to give them exposure. Which, to be honest, I felt I did when I was in my previous life. And now my whole life has turned around in many ways. And a lot of it very, very, very positive and very, very good. But it is not easy.
So we know now, because statistics say that from a very young age, someone can feel that they are. We've got statistics that say from 4 years on, from 7 years on, children have started identifying as different to their specified gender. So with this emergence of, the age that children are starting to show, there is more and more support being offered for those children, but not necessarily for their parents and their carers. So do you think that as a college we should then be working more with our parents maybe?
Well, as an education institution, you've got to know parents. Yeah. They are so important because the young people get through on the basis that they have support there. Unless they're in a working situation and they're living and so on. But, notion that you need to support the parents. And when you say 4, well, of course, when did I feel different? When I was very, very small. But nowadays you can, and that's marvellous that young people know that they can talk to somebody. It's never going to be easy, we know that, but as long as you've got somebody out there that can say, well, we have some idea of what you're going through, and we can't know exactly, but if we could be there for you, then that's
So I think that we can probably go on to a few questions from our listeners. Everybody who's registered, log in today, so we go for it.
Absolutely. Is it a record?
So we're just waiting for some of the questions to filter through, and it will take a minute or two to filter. But we were speaking before about we're primarily speaking about transgender at the moment. A lot of organizations speak about LGB, and then we've added the T.
IQ.
And then there's the I, and then there's the Q. I think for us, it's on the side of things, we've never had that journey as a person. I've said this in training myself. I've never questioned my sex or my gender. I never even thought or realized that I could. So from my perspective, everything was always as my parents had thought it was, and I'd been raised to be. So for those of us, out there who are maybe still questioning our identity, or is the support, do you find, the same as it is for a transgender or for a gay person? Is the support very different, or is it? Do you understand?
There's similarities to society. We're on in terms of gay people, because now we have same-sex marriage and so on. So those things are moved forward, but there's still discrimination goes on.
I've got a question. So, as a parent, I find it interesting discussing how you can help your children. However, is it wrong to feel like you need to grieve the loss of your child through transition?
No, it's not. No, it isn't. I can say that from experience. It really isn't. A lot of people go through it. Just as if you're a transgender parent who's transgender as myself, then those people in your family, they go through it as well. And it's taken me a long time to make relationships with my children. And that's only partial. But yes, they do it, yeah.
Okay. So, hi, I'm still in the closet to my family and friends, but not to college or work. How do I tell my wife about my being trans? It's tearing me apart, thinking I telling her will cause her so much pain.
Well, yeah. Is there an easy way? There isn't. There isn't. You just have to. I don't know. I haven't got a magic ball, a magic, to tell a magic wand to tell you how to do that. It's how you feel about the situation that you can talk about. I don't really know. I really, be brutally honest, I wouldn't know how to do it.
I think that sometimes, in trying to be true to ourselves, we're trying so hard to protect people that we love.
That's right.
So we think more about their happiness than ours, but then does there come a time when we start resenting that person?
Well, for me, there was.
Yeah.
It was that time when I thought, well, children are growing up, the children are going out to the world,
living their
lives. Just now, well, I'm going to live the life I want to live.
Exactly.
But it still causes pain. So there's no easy way around it. But then again, you see, it hurts yourself if you keep it hidden all the time.
So shall we just answer that question maybe with there are support services out there. Please contact the college if you feel that we can support you in any way, shape or form. We can signpost you to services that can help people in your situation. As Melanie says, it's not going to be easy necessarily, but there's always hope. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Next one's a good one. What sort of language should we use? Well, it's got to be right, or don't speak to me. You've got to have a way of saying, you've really got to pick out as whether people are saying what they're saying because they're just used to speaking that way and doing it that way, or they're saying what they're saying because they are trying to offend you. And that's very, very difficult to pick out. In theory, whenever somebody says something which is offensive, you can go and make a complaint to the police. But in practice, it's not going to be as hard and fast as that. There will be times when you've got to decide, well, yes, I've got to make a complaint. But, when people are being genuine and they're being just generally, their use of language is from something they've been brought up with, just as we got changes in language in terms of race and disability and everything else. Then it's a learning process, and you've got to be able to discern whether people are trying to be rude or whether they're just not used to it, and that's the way they've all. I've had that experience in so many places, and I have to decide whether those people are being. Do I want to know those people, and work and get to understand how you feel, or you don't want to know, and you've got to make those decisions.
And I think it's the same with any of our non-protected characteristics, is it not? There are words that sometimes we know that, older generations might have used, which are not acceptable today. So it is the ability to discern, maybe.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. I mean, being a race coordinator, I know that we made a difference in the schools to the way the language that children used in the classroom and in the home and everything, and that affected the parents and that affected the community and so on. So I wouldn't say that we did everything right, but it's that process, whereas older people have not had that experience, and so they come from a different situation.
Do you sometimes think that it's that person as well? It's the individual who you're speaking to who, some people will be offended and some people won't.
Right. So
it's just about their journey.
The touchstone is, how do those people want to be addressed? Find out. It's quite simple. I don't like to be called that. I don't like to be called. Well, okay. You may think, well, I think it's all right. Well, okay, but for that particular situation, don't.
Right.
It's quite simple.
Okay. So is it better to say the wrong thing and try to just avoid saying anything in fear of upsetting someone, maybe?
As I said, the touchstone is find out what people.
Okay.
What
so
people
ask
want.
the question.
Ask the question.
Yeah.
How do you see yourself?
Right.
Are you he, him, she? What do you like? It's not difficult. It's not good.
Thank you. Okay, so the question about telling my family about transitioning is really interesting. Are there any family support groups?
Well, we mentioned Hannah.
New beginnings.
Janine, you've got the Jessens. We've got mermaids.
Right.
So we've got Johnson's mermaids.
Yeah.
We've got Liam Mason. We've got Bypass and Giles. So, you know, they will be there. And you've got Bypass, which is in town. So if you're ever in town and you're on your own and you want to go in and talk, I'm sure there'll be somebody who will pick up and talk with you.
We have linked with Bypass now and we're trying to develop a partnership, but we haven't really made that contact yet in terms of let's get together and let's speak. So watch the space because you, their colleague, will, you know, definitely bring that support to our young people. How can we best support individuals who have not yet accepted their own preferences?
Wow. How can we best support it?
That's a good question.
It's very good. I don't know. How can we best support individuals who have not yet accepted their answers? Wait till they're ready. Wait till they're ready and give them support when they come along for support. Give them support. I can't really see any other way around it. You can't tell somebody, oh, by the way, did you realise you're transgender?
So just give them a chance to grow, develop, and grow into their own skin and feel comfortable.
And I'm sure that when they do come out and say something, they'll be so relieved that you already knew. That it was just a question of the right time. Yeah, people have to be given their own space and time.
Okay. So then the next question is, what is the best method of support for young people? Face-to-face, webinars like this one, or non-contact support, such as maybe posters, you know? What do you see happening in the supporting agencies that you work with?
Meeting up, going to meetings, talking to people, being able to do things, you know, don't forget that all these agencies have got confidentiality written into the way forward. The Trans Health Project at your house, that's got confidentiality and training, you get it drummed into you, you know, which is quite right. So, you know, don't be afraid to go to those places because you will get support. And you know, and if you want you know, a one-to-one, it will be available, you know. And sometimes going to GP and feeling different, and a good GP which will refer you on. And if it's a situation where you've got to be referred to you know, GIS, then you know that's you've got to do that on the health service. That's the way to go. But don't be afraid to go and speak to people on an individual basis because you won't be worried about that.
So should we encourage a young person to discuss things with their family if they will face rejection, maybe? Or shall we just continue to have them in private?
Well, you might have answered your own question. You've got to look at the situation and judge it on the basis. As long as the person who is wanting to change or feels different is able to confide in you, that you will keep that confidentiality, unless there's a danger.
Exactly.
You know, that's always a touchstone of confidentiality. There comes a time when whatever the person is in, maybe in danger, whether maybe some child protection issues, then you can't keep that. But when it's generally confidential, yes.
Which is our way of safeguarding anyway,
Yes, that's right.
So in sexual health, we work under the FASER guidelines and that sort of thing. So you're basically saying that's the same would apply in transgender young persons.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can always remember that child protection issue. I cannot keep it to myself. Absolutely. You know,
safety of the child is more.
And really, you want, but that may be that the people might be a bit nervous about telling you. But then again, you've got to let them know that you're not going to just keep quiet. You know, it's not a confessional.
Yeah, we tell them that beforehand anyway, and so they know. Yeah. So the next question is, what is the value of being able to assess services such as counselling in college? Does this help or confuse matters due to the NHS processes for transitioning?
Good one.
Yeah, very good.
Well, it depends how far the person wants to go. If they actually want to go into the medical situation, unfortunately, the CGCs of the various health areas, like a separate CGC, have their ways of working, which are not always the best way of working. But you've really got to go with that. But maybe the first step counselling is the way you want to go. And then maybe after you've discussed it with somebody, that you decide you've got to go and see a GP and get referred and end up with the psychiatric services. Because the whole NHS process, and as you say, NHS is good to say that because it is a problem. It is a problem because NHS transgender is a mental health issue. And is that really appropriate in this day and age? But then that's the way we work from, and I, like anybody else who is transitioning, has to work on those grounds, and it can be frustrating, it can be upsetting, but we've just got to keep. And something like in trust is useful because you have people there who actually transition, so they know the ins and outs. And there's people in, for instance, advocates. The people in advocates are excellent. They do psychosexual counselling and all the rest of it, but they are very, very good, and they are reliable, and you can talk to them about anything, things like that. So there are lots of places that you can go to get help. I hope that answers the question.
If there are any other questions, please do email us, and we will try our best to answer them for you. We will be in contact with all of the services that we mentioned to show them the webinar and, get advice from them so that we can empower ourselves to be able to answer any future questions and support, young people in the way that we should be supporting them. Everyone's different, so everyone needs their own specific support package.
That must always be the thing. What people want must be the touchstone.
Yeah.
But it's always, edged in by the fact that the services work a certain way. And you may want to have hormones, etc., but you can't just do it like that. And some people do actually get hormones through the internet, or whether that's safe or not, I wouldn't like to say. But you do have certain procedures you have to go through. Unfortunately, it does take time.
It does.
It does take time. It can be very frustrating.
So we've got another question. So what if you don't fit into the NHS box for being trans? Do you just go along with them to get help? Or what would be the route or the advice?
Well, you go as far as you want to, really. You can fall out of any situation, but to get back into it, because things now, with the way things are, they have times, so that people tend to go along with it because if you don't, you might be in a situation you end up with nothing. But do you go along with them just to get help? Well, again, it's an individual. I don't know. Is there an easy answer in that? I mean, there are trans people who've got relationships, who very happy relationships with people of the initial sex, who say that, and they're quite happy, not even thinking about going the whole way. Whereas some people feel that they want to. Whatever happens, they've got to go that whole way.
So are we overthinking it? I mean, sometimes I feel like, why do we have to have the LGBT or the black or why can we not just say we support inclusively or we support, why do we have to have those labels? Do we sometimes do too much too?
Yeah, I think we do. But at the same time, you'd want to be known. At some stage, you do need to know there's a difference. But yeah, you might be a little bit like and as I said, whatever people want to be seen, however they want to be there for them, I think that's the key.
Okay. So, if you know that your child is struggling with transgender, should parents make assumptions?
No. No. You've got to be there for your child. Haven't you? And maybe the parents like know that how did you get on with that? Well, do you get picked on or stuff like that? Things like that. How did you see it? So, yeah.
I think some of the advice that there's a lady called Darby Fox. She's an adolescent and family therapist. So she says trust your child to know themselves, because studies have shown that gender identity starts to develop as early as the first year of your life, and that it's solidified by the age of 4, which is quite interesting. It's something I've only just learned. So trust your child maybe to know and to be able to speak to you. Maybe if we speak about these topics openly, the child feels that that's a way in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But if you, it's like lots of things. If people know, they can talk about it. It's all right. At one time, parents wouldn't talk about having children and things like that to the children. They wouldn't discuss things like that. So things do move on all the time. But as you say, the age of 4, I can remember back to when I was very small, and you didn't know whether that was significant or not. There was nobody there to tell you it was. Where now that you say, "Well, it is significant," you realise, which may be sometimes too much. Well, actually, no. I just like to wear a dress.
I know. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
So are we still waiting for any more questions to come through?
And of course, we haven't really discussed about transgender in the sense of not just male to female, but female to male, which tends to get very much overlooked at times. Because we do think of one way that the male is going to have the problems. But if they want to transition to one, they're going to have all the contraceptive. But we forget that the females want to transition also. As William Mason can.
Okay, sure. So we've got another question. So at what age are support services available from?
Forever. I would have thought. Is there an age? I don't know.
I know because we work in, in a college, and I know that there are support services for students or young people from the age of 16 onwards. But I don't know necessarily younger than that, because I don't work in school, or I don't have contact with schools per se. So that's an interesting question, and it's one that we need to get back to and find some more information about. Oh, we've got a long question here.
Very good one, yes.
Do you feel that the LGBT groups, etc., are encouraging segregation? Whilst I can appreciate it gives a safe place for many people, gay, transgender, etc., do you not feel we should be encouraging people to accept differences? It would be interesting to perhaps start introducing this into sex education. Lessons at school at a young age. Do you feel that covering these issues at a young age would perhaps be a benefit?
Yeah. Well, yes.
That's a short answer.
You've got a lot of stuff in there. One, do you feel that are encouraging segregation? To some extent, yes. Some people in the LGBTQIQ want to stay there. Yeah. Other people like myself didn't. I wanted to be part of society, so I wanted to go out. And I remember just taking King of the Swingers and the right net, and that was something that struck me in Manchester, where people would not go outside of Canal Street. They would not go anywhere else. And I've always thought that's not good. That's not good. You should always working towards becoming part of society. I mean, when we did the Dragon Dance, there was 4 people from Pride, volunteers who were involved with it, and nobody knew who were Pride volunteers, and nobody asked questions. But even if I could be identified as a Pride volunteer, it wouldn't bother me. When we go and we do backpacking for Pride, you're there in an ordinary supermarket with ordinary people, and you'd be surprised the positive reaction you get. The majority of people are good. They may not understand everything, but they don't start from the basis that keep away from me, and they don't always come to let you know that they accept what you are. Some people do, of course. But so, yes, you're right in some stage, but we must always encourage, and by society encouraging trans, LGBT, transgender, everything, to be able to be part of society. And yes, it does. Now, sex education is very, very interesting, because I can remember that at one point, unless you had a science degree, you weren't allowed to take the lessons when it came to the question of fertility. And you couldn't discuss it in terms of love. You had to discuss it in terms of the physical. Giving birth to children and all that. And now that's not that long ago. So, we're asking for PSHE to become even more, and schools can't do everything. The government wants schools to do everything. The government wants people to make sure that the people who are in there are not illegal refugees and all this, that, and the other. So, schools can't do everything. All the parts of society have to come in. You can't just rely totally on schools.
Right. Teachers do wear many hats nowadays, don't they?
Well, that's right. Yeah.
So we've got another question. If someone chooses not to fully transition in terms of surgery, however they choose to live life as someone of the opposite gender, are they still classed as trans?
Absolutely.
So you don't have to. Many people live their life in transition.
Yeah. Not everybody changes their name.
Right.
Not everybody wants to be seen wholly as, some do and some don't. Yes,
that's a great question.
It is a great one, man. Yeah, if someone chooses not to fully transition in terms of surgery, yeah. I mean, whenever you're involved in that process, if at any stage you get discharged, it's hard to get back into it. But you might have got where you want to be, and you're happy with that. The problem lies in that if you want to be seen as transgender, society doesn't always see it that way. You're still male, or you're still female. You're not what you want to be recognised as.
Right.
Famously Jermaine Greer, transgender people can never be women. Okay, well, that's probably a good headline grabber, but it doesn't help people who are thinking about this thing in their life, the way they want to be seen.
So generally, would someone who's transitioned, so someone who's trans feminine, want to be known as a woman or a trans woman? Is it different for different people?
Oh, no. Interesting enough, there was Jess Phillips, was it last night? I saw on television. She's obviously trans. But the Kathy from Channel 4, Kathy Newman, was interviewing on Channel 4. A beautiful interview. She's written this book on every woman. And not once did they use the word trans.
Right.
They talked about women. And this MP talked about being a woman, not about being a trans woman. In many ways, it's society that wants to keep that. Yeah. I want to be seen. I'm lonely, and I'm a female jazz singer. That's the way I like to be seen. I'm not a drag artist. I'm not. That's the way I like to be seen. And most, and as the other way around, of course, that trans men want to be men. They don't want to be trans men. They want to be men. Yeah.
I'm sure. So
Cool.
I think that, with us, obviously, we're trying to gain formal recognition for the work that we're doing to support young people who are transitioning. And you've given us a lot of feedback so far. We sometimes feel that, for the young people out there, there's a lot. But for us who are still learning about, transgender, there isn't really all that much unless we go to a formal training session. So is it okay to ask people questions?
Depends.
Yeah.
I've been in a situation in Manchester with somebody saying, "Oh, are you a transsexual? Are you a trans? Are you a transition?" I just said, "I'm me. If you don't like it." Sometimes people are asking questions because they're nosy and they're cheeky. And sometimes, again, you've got to know the context in which you're answering those questions. I mean, we're okay here because we're adults, we're in a protected environment. And as you said to people, if you come along and you ask a question which you think is disrespectful, you won't get to ask it. Simple. Whereas open society, you're not in that position. So I don't think it's a good idea to just start talking. Let the person who's involved, they will come forward and say what they feel. You know, most of us don't have any trouble saying what we sometimes I feel terrible. You know, and I feel like, look at it,
Right.
and I don't want to go to that place. And
You want to just be you, not be questioned.
I don't want to be questioned. You know, there's a lot of very, very interesting stuff on YouTube. People who go through this and say, well, you know, like I said, when did you know you were heterosexual? You know, when did you realise you fancied women? You know, this, you know, all this, and you can make jokes about it, but they're valid jokes because people don't seem to be fazed by asking you those questions.
Right.
You know, they think they have a right to ask you those questions. And most decent people don't, to be fair and honest. And those that don't ask questions and just want to have a go at you, well, then you've got the law. You've got the law.
Absolutely.
And you shouldn't hesitate. If you see somebody who's getting serious problems, you shouldn't hesitate to, as Janine said, through a third party report. It's not the person who's being attacked that we go to someone else who sees it. And I've always been that way. I've always worked that way in an area. And when I was part of the police liaison committee, LGBT liaison committee, I always used to encourage that that's where we're working towards. We're looking towards third parties. And you know, some people say the fact that hate crime has gone up is because society's more dangerous. Well, you could say that, but it could also be the fact that other people feel confident to go forward and report because they know it'll be taken seriously by the authorities. And I think that's where we are in Liverpool.
I think for us, it was also the question of, you know, when someone walks into a police station, they're obviously going to commit a report a crime or, you know, something to do with criminal activity. Whereas college environment protects them a little more because you could be doing anything here. You could be studying, you could be using the libraries, the salons, or any of the other services, but you could also be reporting an incident or a crime, you know, on behalf of, or, you know, as a victim. So do we have any
and the police
questions?
have procedures that they have to go through. And I mean, obviously, sometimes it won't work, sometimes it will be mistakes, and times when people don't take it seriously and so on. But then that's what, you know, we've got third party for, and that's what we've got for. And you can rest assured the police look at all their statistics regularly. As you were saying, Sigma. Yeah. The Sigma teams look at their statistics, which is all hate crime.
And Stop Hate UK and all those.
Yeah. People are always looking to see any changes. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Melanie.
Thank you.
Do you think that there's anything that you'd like to say to our parents? Because this was basically for the benefit of our parents and our carers, you know, because we'd like to forge those links with them in terms of the kind of support that's out there. Yeah. So do you think that you have anything that you'd like to say to parents and carers?
You know, if your child is different, then that's just the way it is. And you need to give them as much support as possible and make them feel as though they're not somehow, they failed you. And I think also that you see things as that it's part of their life, their change. And to be available for them when in different situations and situations like that. But yeah, just I think so. Be able to listen to what they have to tell you about their lives, about their experiences, and let them do it in their time. Go create the environment where you can come out and say these things without listening.
I think because ultimately all a child ever wants is to be loved.
Yeah.
So
we all do that.
We all do, yeah. To be able to be loved and to know them.
In various ways. It was just on stage singing.
I know. Well, Melanie, thank you so much. Our journey isn't over because, you know, we've forged this partnership now and we continue to just work together, and we're so grateful for the support, the advice and the guidance you've given us.
I hope we can take things forward and keep going, and it's never going to stop with it. So it's a journey which people will be taking at their own pace. And I think it is that, isn't it? Let people do it in their time.
Okay, so thank you to Melanie. Thank you to everybody who joined in, and thank you to everybody who asked questions. We hope that it's been a helpful session for you. There's someone behind the scenes who's helped us with all the technicalities. Ben Davis from our marketing team. I'd like to say thank you to Ben as well. Have a lovely evening and stay safe. Good night.